All right, let's get right into it. For 500 years, there's been this one short, explosive book that served as the ultimate guide to power, politics, and ruthlessness. Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. It's a book so notorious, the author's name literally became an adjective for being cunning and deceitful.
And believe me, that reputation isn't anything new. Right from the get-go, people were absolutely horrified. The powerful Cardinal Reginald Pole claimed it was written by the finger of Satan himself. I mean, you can't get much more damning than that.
But is that really what it is? Is The Prince just a handbook for tyrants, a cynical guide to being a bad person? Or is there something else going on here, something deeper? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out.
You better believe the powers that be thought it was dangerous. The book was so controversial, the Catholic Church slapped it on its index of prohibited books. It was officially banned for more than 200 years. So what on earth was in this book that made it so threatening?
Well, to really get the book, you have to understand the man who wrote it and the absolutely desperate spot he was in. See, this wasn't some academic work written from a comfy chair in an ivory tower. No, this was written from rock bottom.
Niccolò Machiavelli was a big deal. For 14 years, he was a top diplomat for the Republic of Florence. But then, everything fell apart. The powerful Medici family swept back into power, and Machiavelli's world just collapsed. He was fired, accused of plotting against them, thrown in prison, and even tortured. He was eventually let go, but forced into exile on his little farm, a completely broken man.
And this, right here, is the crucial piece of the puzzle. The Prince wasn't some abstract philosophical text. It was a Hail Mary pass. It was, and this is not an exaggeration, the most audacious job application in history, written for the very same Medici rulers who had destroyed his life, all to prove he was still the guy they needed.
So what made it so groundbreaking? It was brutally, unapologetically honest. The philosopher Francis Bacon totally nailed it. Machiavelli wasn't writing about how leaders ought to act in some perfect imaginary world. Nope, he was writing about what powerful people actually do to grab and hold on to power in the messy, real world.
And this is where we get to the advice that sent shockwaves through the world. So let's break down some of these hard rules for how to play the game of power.
Listen to this stuff. It still sounds pretty shocking today. He argued that it's better to be feared than loved, because fear is just more reliable, that you have to crush your enemies completely, and that a truly effective leader has to learn how not to be good for when the situation demands it. The bottom line? Winning is everything, because if you win, people will forget how you did it.
Now, Machiavelli wasn't just throwing out theories. He backed them up with real-world examples. And his absolute favorite case study was the infamous, totally ruthless Cesare Borgia, who he saw as a master of what he called cruelty well used.
Okay, so check out this playbook. Borgia takes over this region that's pure chaos. Step 1, he brings in a notoriously cruel henchman, a guy named Ramiro de Orco, and gives him total power to clean house. And the Orco does it with absolute brutality. But once the region is peaceful, Borgia knows the people hate this guy. So, step 3, in a stroke of genius, he has de Orco arrested, cut in half, and displayed in the town square for everyone to see.
And the result? Machiavelli says the people were left both gratified and shocked. Borgia got all the benefit of the restored order, but he also got to look like the people's hero who saved them from the tyrant that he put in charge. He basically outsourced the dirty work and then took all the credit for justice. It's just pure Machiavelli.
But, and this is a big but, if you stop there, you're missing the bigger picture. Machiavelli was way more than just a cheerleader for brutality. He was a deep thinker, and there are all these nuances in his work that most people just skim right over. He actually made a really important distinction himself. He wrote that things like slaughtering your own citizens or betraying your friends, sure, that might get you an empire, but it will never get you glory. For Machiavelli, the reason for the cruelty was what mattered. It had to be quick, effective, and for the good of the state, not just being cruel for cruelty's sake.
And this leads to a really fascinating theory. What if the prince was never actually meant for rulers at all? Some people argue it was actually a warning, a kind of public service announcement, exposing the dark playbook of tyrants so that regular citizens could see the moves coming and maybe, just maybe, defend themselves. Machiavelli was also obsessed with the role of luck in politics. He called it fortune, and he had this amazing metaphor for it. He said, fortune is like a raging river, a wild, unstoppable force that can just wash everything away when it floods.
And here's the key lesson. You can't stop the river. A smart leader doesn't even try. Instead, when the weather's calm, they prepare.
They build dikes and banks, metaphorically of course, to manage the flood when it inevitably comes. In other words, a great leader doesn't prevent bad luck, they prepare for it.
So why does a 500-year-old book still matter? Because honestly, these tactics never went away. You can see them everywhere, from corporate boardrooms to the world stage.
Take that rule about using fear to maintain control. When a top engineer left Microsoft to go to Google, the CEO at the time, Steve Ballmer, reportedly threw a chair across his office and screamed that he was going to kill Google. That kind of intimidating, fear-based management, a classic Machiavellian move.
Or what about the idea of being harsh when you need to be? Mark Pincus, the founder of the gaming company Zynga, was notorious for his cutthroat style, obsessively tracking his employees' performance with data and setting these brutal deadlines. It's a perfect example of putting results above everything else.
And on a much, much darker scale, these ideas have been used to build empires. I mean, look at Joseph Stalin. He used systematic terror, brutal force, and a massive propaganda machine to grab absolute power in the Soviet Union.
This is a terrifying, real-world application of one of Machiavelli's most chilling lines. If you're going to do people harm, do it in such a way that you do not have to fear their vengeance. Stalin didn't just disagree with his rivals, he had them completely eliminated, making sure there was no one left who could possibly come back for revenge.
So where does that leave us with Machiavelli? Was he evil? A teacher of evil? Or was he maybe just the first person with the guts to write down the cold, hard truth about how power really works?
You know, maybe his greatest lesson is just this: power plays by its own set of rules. He wasn't necessarily telling us to like those rules or even to use them, but he was telling us that they exist. And to pretend they don't, whether you're a president or just a regular citizen, is basically to sign yourself up to be a victim of someone who does.
Which really leaves us with one final, uncomfortable question. In our own competitive world, where everyone's fighting for something, is it truly possible for anyone to lead, or even just to get ahead, without at some point needing to learn what Machiavelli called how not to be good?